Bonjour. This is Melissa Hale Spencer, the editor of the Altamont Enterprise, here today with a very special guest. About 6 months ago, I got an email from an author in France who was doing research on the area, particularly Voorheesville, and wanted to know if I could help. And at the time, I thought it'd be great to do a podcast. I did not expect he would be showing up in person with his wife and along with someone familiar to our readers, Dennis Sullivan, who, of course, has written the village history of Voorheesville. So welcome, Fabrice.
Bonjour, Melissa. Hello, everybody.
You. I was working up to pronouncing your last name correctly, and I hesitated, but I'm going to do it. Legois.
Oh.
Try.
Legois.
Legois. We have it now. Legois. Thank you, Fabrice. So
you're welcome, Melissa.
I picked up Fabrice and Karine from Albany, where they were staying at a B&B, and on the drive out here, I asked a little about him, and we both became very emotional. I was in tears, actually, listening to the story of his grandmother who shaped him and raised him. And could you just tell us the story of your grandmother during World War II?
Of course I do.
Thank you.
I've been raised by what we call a lady, and she was my grandmother. Her first name was Jeannine Robert. This lady was, when I knew her, and I spent some time with her, she was speaking already 5 languages fluently. But when did it come from? My great-great-grandfather were poor people, and my great-great-grandfather was speaking already Russian and German. Did World War I, and has been saved by German soldier from the German army. Then my grandmother was the only child of this family. And we were living in the middle of France in Clermont-Ferrand, close to Vichy, where the collaborate government from France was setting during World War II. My great-grandmother, Jeannine, had his college degree in 1942. She was blonde hair, blue eyes, and she was speaking fluently German and Italian.
And she looked like Marlene Dietrich.
And she was looking like Marlene Dietrich.
Beautiful.
Like the German soldier were calling her, because when she was biking with her best friend, Madé, everybody was looking at her, the German, and were calling her Marlene Dietrich, and she was insulting them in German, just because she was by herself. During that time, she met a lieutenant, a beautiful guy. That's I heard about her story. A very smart guy, but he was also a lieutenant from the SS Gestapo. And that guy fell in love with my grandmother, who did not, because the Germans were the enemy. And also there was a secret with her best friend, Madé. Madé was Jewish, but considered as Catholic and known as Catholic, but nobody except my grandmother knew that she was Jewish. Siegfried, after some times trying to date my grandmother, knew that something was going on with Madé, and he was trying to go after her. During the late year of 1943 and the beginning of 1944, my grandmother had to do something. With Madé, they flew away from Clermont-Ferrand. But before that, she did what she had to do. Siegfried died.
She actually killed him. Your grandmother killed him with a knife.
With his knife. And because Siegfried was profoundly in love with my grandmother, he gave her a Mein Kampf book from Adolf Hitler, signed by him. So it was a way to go everywhere she could go.
It was like her passport as she worked for the resistance. She would use this copy of Mein Kampf.
On Mein Kampf saying, you know who I know? I know this guy. But, at this time there were no real internet, no phone, no cellular. So when she was saying that, who won't believe her? Because she was speaking fluently German and so beautiful. She used it, her charm. She went to Paris, and by the year 1945, she met plenty of American GIs. And also she started to work at the Second Bureau, the second office, which is kind of secret service of the French military, because she was liking a lot General de Gaulle, and she became lieutenant because she could translate German and Italian notes like it was piece of cake for her. Sorry for that expression, but
no, that's a very good American expression, a piece of cake. Well, also, one of the things that struck me, you told me earlier today, was your grandmother had seen an American movie. She had seen Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind, exactly.
And she had a sense from the GIs and from this movie that she liked America.
She has never been in the United States. She sacrificed her life for me to permit me to come over here. And but her love, she gave me her love to your country. All the Hollywood movies from the great years, seeing every movie on Tuesday night in France. On the second part of the evening, you could see the movie in with the real voice of the actors from Hollywood. So I've been swimming in American culture since my childhood. Like, for example, going to see a Disney movie like Heaven Can Wait. This is my first movie that I recall with Warren Beatty. And
yeah, well, tell us about that, because I was fascinated how it inspired you to play American football.
Well, yeah, you know, when you're a kid, you like knights, soldiers. You like to fight with some sort of swords and shields. And when we went to see that movie, I saw the Los Angeles Rams for my first time, but I thought at that time, at 8 years old, that it was some kind of knights. They were playing some kind of games like the chivalry was the knights were doing during that Middle Age. So when we went outside from the theater, I told my grandmother that one day I would be a knight like these guys. And at 17 years old, I started my career as a defensive end. I'm 5'11". I just precise my size.
Yeah.
And
when he first told me this, I said, "But you're not a great big football player." He's a very fit-looking man, kind of dapper, goatee, but it's not like you look at him and say, "Football."
Yeah, but you know how to tackle someone. When you have to do it, you do it. So if you have to come from the blind side to a quarterback, you have to do your 2-step forward, 3-step on the left, and you come from the back side, or well, from the blind side, and you tackle him, you sack him. And that's what I was doing in my French club, well, French team, the Crazy Lions, Dynamique de Sèvres.
How do you say it in French? The Crazy Lions?
The Crazy Lions from the Dynamique de Sèvres.
Oh, I like that. Well, so tell us a little about how you became a novelist. You've published one novel. Tell us about that one.
I lost my grandmother when I was 22 years old. I lost my everything, my world, my friend, my love, my everything. Just a week before she died, and the way she raised me, she wanted me to come here, to live here, because here I would be happy. And I gave her my word. 6 years after her death, I became a sport journalist for a French newspaper called L'Équipe. I've been blessed and honored to cross the path of great sports journalists such as Paul Zimmerman, Dr. Z from Sports Illustrated, Gordon Forbes from USA Today, Marc Dupree, sorry if I pronounce it not the right way, but and after that span, after 4 years living in New York, I came back to France, And 5 years ago, I decided, well, I've been pushed hard by my best friends that I know for the past 36 years, who were pushing me hard, saying, you have something. Remember your time when you were a sport journalist, how you wrote for the kids instead for the grown-ups. Even if I was covering every NBA games or NFL games, I was writing for the grown-ups. But I was also remembering the kid that I was or that I were when I was a kid.
When you were 8 years old,
Yeah.
and you watched that movie and you thought of them as knights.
Yeah, and also being grateful or blessed to receive every Wednesday the Tuesday issue from the USA Today international issue. So I started 5 years ago to take that path to become a novelist. It's hard work, and my first book has won 3 prizes. Well, 2 French prizes and a honorable mention from the New York Book Festival for a book written in French.
It's called Abby.
Abby, my main character. What I've changed about my way of liking reading is instead of following the path of 2 detectives, a doctor, a private, a hero trying to catch up a serial killer, my hero is the reader. I ask my reader to meet my characters, and by your own feelings, your own experience, living experience, your own life, your own history, you are going to judge or to find out the truth of my novel. That's what it worked for Abby. And I hope for the next novel, but I'm just halfway.
So that brings us to your trip here with your lovely wife. You are somebody that really believes in hands-on research. And when I first picked up Fabrice and Karen at their lodgings, Fabrice was telling me, he thought it would be flat in Albany, and here he saw hills, and he wants to smell the air and feel what it's like. And then when we had lunch, he reaches into his satchel and he pulls out this antique button where he's actually going to be using that as part of his description. He finds actual objects and does research to make sure all of his facts are right. And over lunchtime, Dennis Sullivan called up Tim Albright, who is a local historian, as our listeners know, and he came over with his arrowheads that he had dug up on Indian Ladder Farm, and we all got to feel them and think about that history. So tell us about your novel as a waltz. I love the way you describe that.
What do you mean?
You were saying how your novel is like a waltz. It comes in 3 parts.
Yes.
It's like a dance.
The waltz. Okay.
Yes.
Imagine the same story, but which is going to happen 3 times in 3 different time space. The first time is 2017, starting on the 13th of April 2017. 2 characters, 2 detectives from the NYPD 10th Precinct in New York. My main character, John D. Billy, is called upon a crime scene. There, the lieutenant or the detective is asking him if he is the real John D. Billy. There is a body, smoked body, and the detective is saying, there is a postcard for you. John D. Billy, signed by the kid, the Tulip Kid. The next scene, the next step of the waltz is we will be in 1973 in Voorheesville area. The main part, the main link between the 2 chapters is my 2 first characters have blue eyes, and the character that you will discover in 1973 will have blue eyes as well. And then, next step, the third, we will be in 17th century with a blue-eyed kid called the Tulip Kid. What is the link? What is the story? You, readers, will discover the truth.
It's so tantalizing. So tell us about why you chose Voorheesville. I mean, here you are in France, and we're across the ocean in a little teeny place. Why Voorheesville?
There are many routes for that. The first one is to pay a tribute to my grandmother. As I told you, she raised me, and during her lifetime, after General de Gaulle resigned in 1948 in France from the government, she was so upset about France leaving General de Gaulle, seeing him going away. She decided to move to Holland. And she worked there as a secretary from the head director of Philips Company, staying in Eindhoven, close to Scheveningen, on the west side, close to Amsterdam and The Hague. She told me that it was her best years in her lifetime. That's my tribute to her, part one. The second part is because we are going to talk about my novels. They all have a link. You know that Halloween is for the kids, right? Mm-hmm. Kid trick or treats, but there are no stories for grown-ups. I don't say that in my book there is any horror or fantastic. No, you won't find any kind of thing. I said that you are my cop, my detective, my book, my detective, my novel, and Halloween. You may have heard about Halloween the 13th, and the serial killer is named Jason Voorhees. In Dutch, Voorheen, Voorheen, means formerly. Formerly, in the 17th century, we had what here? Dutch people. My tribute, my link between my grandmother, my story, and some kind of Jason Voorhees. Voorheesville was meant to be. I can't say anything else. But that's very plain. That's very simple as that.
Now, one of the things that you were discussing earlier in the day with me, and I just loved it, is a theme in your book. If you could tell us a little about this, the idea of society or particular cultures passing on their prejudices. This idea, and you yourself, you said, suffered as a child. And just tell us a little about how your novel addresses those themes.
Okay, so my main project is to work on 12 books like Hercules or Rabelais. It's a philosophical point of view on my book, on the third readings. The first time that you read my book, you will discover the story. Many items that I've put into it. On the second time that you are going to read it, you are going to discover some part of the items that I've put into it, and you will say, wow, what a work. And on the third side, the third reading, it's a pamphlet, a treaty, a philosophical treaty. On my first novel, I was wondering why people act as cowards throughout their ages.
Why they act as, I missed the word, cowards? Why they act as cowards?
Yes, okay. Coward. Like when you are a kid, when you are a teenager, a grown-up, and an elder. And I was wondering, because as you said, my grandmother raised me for something. My mom was not a real mom, like we say. She was alcoholic, drug addict, and she was beating me off. She was beating me a lot. And my grandmother was my own human shield. My mom tried to kill me 3 times when I was a kid. And we lived in the shame. We were ashamed about us. But also, fast in my life, I've seen that in France, people were looking at my faces with hit marks. Nobody did something to help us out. And I'm still recovering from it in some part, because
Yeah,
I'm not
that
by
could
my
take a lifetime to recover from if you ever did.
yes, and also I've seen that with Abby, my first novel, which is talking about the abuse that we do on child sometimes. I was not alone. Many readers came back to me and said, thank you. Because you put words, well, you said, you wrote it without writing it. I'm not describing torture, child abuse in my books specifically. My character is just saying, you know what's going on, don't you? And you, by your own experience, you can imagine what's going on. And that's how I write. I don't want to hurt anybody. I just want you to feel what it is to be alone in the dark.
So the idea is to enlighten the readers
Yes.
to the experience.
Yes.
And then you were also saying about how prejudice gets passed on from one generation to the next. And just talk to us a little about that and how we can interrupt that.
Well, on my next novel, I'm wondering why we are still hating each other. Hating because I'm not from the same color, not the same sex, gender. And I was wondering, and a genealogy study, I've shown that we repeat the same thing. We pass the torch from generation to another. It means that I'm not here to judge anyone. I'm making up a story. But imagine that a guy who is hating others in the 17th century and giving the torch to the next generation, which is going to pass the torch, etc., until now. Will they still hate? Yes, unfortunately. Unfortunately, that's how I say that history repeats itself throughout the centuries. We know what happened during World War II. We know it. We have learned it. But I don't see improvements. I see hate again. Why? So it means that we have we celebrate our heroes because these people who saved our lives are heroes, right? But by today we are still hating each other. We are in the 21st century now. 21st century. I think we have to move a little bit, no? We are smart. And if you are smart, you are not here to force others to follow your path. You are here to make others better and to think better. That's what I'm trying to do at my level.
Well, you've taken on a big task. It seems to me in some ways we're getting more tribal than we were. And certainly there are a lot of novelists shaped as you were through another generation by World War II. But what has led you to go back so far to the 1700s, 17th century, actually, 1600s? That's going very, very deep into an American past. What is it you're finding there that furthers this philosophy that you have? I noticed you at lunch were mentioning the tribal warfare that was going on at that time and how you put a love story in the middle of that, which seems to speak exactly to what you were just saying. This hate that it seems almost perpetual, and what happens when you put a love story in the middle of it.
Yeah. I've followed the master, the writing master that we all know, Stephen King. One of his advice is, if you want your story to work, you have to go to the Genesis. The Genesis was the 17th century. To make it right, I had to go back in the past to make sure that every items of my recipe would work in 1973 or in 2017, because there is always a genesis, even in the hate, even in the love, everywhere. So that's where I'm using only Stephen King advice, who told that his secret is when you can work on your story and going back in the past at the beginning, it will work.
And tell us a little about your writing technique. I know Karen was saying you'll even write on napkins. Or how do ideas come to you, and what is your sort of method for writing?
Oh, well, he's going to happy because I'm going to talk about him. There is a writer in France who, first of all, on my first draft on Abbé, Thierry, hi. He told me that I had visions, and so it's like, I stand still, I see a scene in my mind, I got a piece of paper, whatever, tissue, post-it, hand, and I write some words.
Like literally on your hand?
Yeah.
Just to remind you of this vision, this thought that came to you.
The scene that came to my mind, I write some words. It can be read a newspaper, smile, and I leave it. 3 days after that, welcome to the jungle. It's now what I wanted to say with 3 words, and I work on my memory to go back to that famous scene who came to me, and it's like having a camera on my shoulder, and I come from a different angle, and suddenly I go to work on a piece of paper. I write 1, 2, 3 pages. I put it on the side for some days, then go to the computer, work on it for 3, 4, 5 days, and maybe rewriting 20 times a scene, a chapter. Sometimes it happens, and the slowest I am, the better I am, because I have too much in my mind sometimes.
And you said you do a lot of rewriting.
Yes, 20 times sometimes.
Yeah, that's amazing. So do you plot out an entire book when you're starting, or do these visions kind of shape you? You clearly have the 3 different time periods in mind, but do you have a narrative sketched out as you begin, or does it kind of evolve as you're having these visions and writing?
Alors, the details evolve, but at first, the main idea is here. The main idea, then the skeleton. I got a skeleton. The anatomy of my novel is here. Then I will put the muscles, the nerves, the skin, all the things.
You put flesh on the bones.
Flesh on the bones, exactly. But at first, I got everything. My story, the waltz, was there on the first minute.
It was one of your visions.
Because I said, 1, 2, 3,
1, 2, 3. I love it.
And suddenly, I was thinking, music came to my mind. The waltz that I was listening with my grandmother, for example, waltz from Austria. On the 1st of January, you got a waltz in a palace in Austria, in Vienna. The waltz from Vienna. Maybe you have heard about it in Austria, close to Germany.
I didn't know that. Yeah.
And you have on the 1st of January, you have waltz on television, and I was watching it with her. Suddenly, it came to me. I had the music, the sonority of the novel, and I said, okay, from where? And I said, Scheveningen, for her. And Scheveningen, so I started to read history books about the 17th century, and I wrote straightforward my first chapter from that time lapse, and time period. It's way much better. And suddenly, I had my main character. I had my tulip kid. I had his blue eyes. I had the way he was looking at people.
Neat. So, you said you're not wealthy. It took you months to save up for this trip.
Yes.
why is this so important in your life? Why is it that you put so much into this?
Because this is what I am meant to do. Because I don't ask to be rich. I don't ask to be famous. I just want to make people think happy about my readings. And I think that's my way of working a novel. To come here, for example, to see by myself, to breathe the air, I'm blessed and honored to meet so many people. I will have plenty of stories to tell my grandson if I can live to that, if I'm blessed to meet them. Or, as I told you, when I will be back in France and my book will be published, I will be blessed to meet students, teenagers who may have dreams, and I will see it in their eyes, and I will share that when you have a dream, go for it. J.J. Watt said better yesterday on television, by the way, so I'm just copying him. No, that's the way I live.
So who should read your book? Who would this speak to?
Anybody, but first a human being.
Well, that's pretty broad.
Yeah, but no teenagers. No. When a young student, when a young teenager wants to buy my book, I say no.
Why?
Life experience. Because my book, as I told you, is I trust your history, your own way of feeling, your own way of feeling, your life experience. And when you are, 15 years old, you don't have that much experience.
So you don't want to be somebody shaping a 14-year-old. You want to have somebody with life experience that brings that experience to your words and interacts with them that way.
Exactly.
And that leads to a wonderful story, if you don't mind sharing it, about how you and Karine got together.
Do you mean the way we meet?
Well, not the initial meeting, but that she read. Didn't you say that she had read your book?
Okay.
And
So Karine and myself, we know each other for the past 30 years. Sorry. 30 years ago, I knew better her sister, Audrey. Karen was a pain. She was mean. She was teasing me all the time. And I said that it was my fault.
She's laughing now as she hears this and blushing a little too.
And I would say that I was doing the same. We didn't like each other at this time. 3 years ago, that lady won my book in the lottery. She read the book, AB, and at the end of AB, I ask any of my readers to come back to me because my main character has a final question to ask to any readers. That's between the reader and my main character, not me. So that girl with a strange gamer tag, nearly close, I am a pain. So you see the profile. She came back to me and said, yeah, so you asked your reader to come back to you. Yeah, okay. So what is the question? I asked the question. She answered. And suddenly she was different from other readers. She started to talk to me. Like, okay, why are you writing novels? Your novel is great. Where does it come from? Blah, blah, blah.
And she didn't know it was you.
No, because, because you can have more Fabrice Legois in France. I think we have 4 actually at the same time period. And so suddenly she said, yeah, but where you were living in France, blah, blah, blah. I say, yeah, I'm from the southeast of France. And she said, oh, my sister knows pretty well that part of France. Oh, yeah? What's your sister's first name? Maybe I know her. Yeah, only mountains don't meet each other, and that's not true in human history. So she said, Audrey. And suddenly I changed my voice to say, who are you? She said, I'm Karen. I hate you. The first thing that I told her after 30 years is, I hate you. And we meet, and that's all.
And the rest is a love story. Well, that's a great ending anecdote. We're out of time already, but do you have any closing thoughts for our listeners? Any words of wisdom to leave us with?
Live your life because you only live once, and be happy with others. Make everybody around yourself better. That's what I'm doing, and that's the people who provide me throughout my life, like you, Melissa. And I thank you to welcome me, Karen and myself here, because it was awesome today. It was a day to remember, as we say in the United States.
Yes, it was a great day, and thank you.